Hello everyone. So today I am going to discuss to you about laws that encourage ethical conduct. First, what is ethical conduct? Ethics in the workplace is defined as the moral code that guides the behavior of employees with respect to what is right and wrong in regard to conduct and decision making. Ethical decision making in the workplace takes into account the individual employee's best interest and also takes into account the best interest of those impacted. The latter of the definition is often where individual employees struggle to act ethically. Furthermore, ethical behavior doesn't only apply to individual employees. The organization itself should exemplify standards of ethical conduct. Violation of the law usually begin when business people stretch the limits of ethical standards as defined by company or industry code of conduct and then choose to engage in schemes that either knowingly or unwittingly violate the law. In recent years, new laws and regulations have been passed to discourage such decisions and to foster program designed to improve business ethics and social responsibility. The most important of these are the Federal Sentencing Guidelines for Organizations or FSGO, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and the Dodd-Frank Act. One of the goals of these acts is requiring employees to report observed misconduct. The development of reporting system has advanced, with most companies having some method for employees to report observed misconduct. However, while reported misconduct is up, a sizable percentage of employees still do not report misconduct. Now let's continue to federal sentencing guidelines for organizations. As mentioned in Chapter 1, Congress passed the FSGO in 1991 to create an incentive for organizations to develop and implement programs designed to foster ethical and legal compliance. These guidelines, developed by the U.S. Sentencing Commission, apply to all felonies and Class A misdemeanors committed by employees in association with their work. The Commission delineated 7 steps companies must implement to demonstrate due diligence. First, firm must develop and disseminate a code of conduct that communicates required standards and identify key risk areas for organization. So, ayun nga sinasabi dito unang-una daw, dapat ay merong ma-develop na code of conduct ang isang company na kung saan nakasaad dun yung mga kinakailangang rules and regulation na dapat sundin ng bawat isa na nasasakupan ng company na 'to. Siyempre dapat yung mabubuo niyo na pamantayan sa isang company ay naaayon din dun sa kung ano yung, negosyo or kung para saan kung ano yung gamit ng company na yun. Halimbawa, yung company mo ay tungkol sa mga damit, dapat yung rules and regulation mo ay patungkol din doon. Hindi naman pwede na para sa damit yung company mo, tapos yung role mo is for pagkain. Mali naman po yung ganon. Second, high-ranking personnel in the organization who are known to abide by the legal and ethical standards of the industry, such as an ethics officer, vice president of human resources, general counsel, and so forth, must have oversight over the program. So, ayun sa pangalawa, sinasabi na syempre, kapag merong isang company, merong mga namumuno. And sinasabi dito na sa pagbuo ng Code of Conduct, ang dapat mangangasiwa dito ay yung mga matataas yung katungkulan, yung mga high-ranking personnel na tinatawag. Third, no one with known propensity to engage in misconduct should be put in a position of authority. Sa pangatlo naman, sinasabi dito na dapat daw kung yung dapat na ilagay sa posisyon bilang mamumuno ay yung matino at hindi yung kilala na matakaw sa gulo ganun or laging gumagawa ng mali, parang ganun. Dapat matinong leader siya, ganun, matinong mamumuno ng isang company. Fourth, a communicating system for disseminating standards and procedures ethics training must also be put into place. So dito sa pang-apat sinasabi na yung way ng communication or ng pakikipag-communicate sa bawat isa ay dapat din nasa tama. Like, yung procedure ng pagpapalaganap ng code of conduct sa isang company ay dapat nasa maayos din siya. Fifth, organizational communication should include a way for employees to report misconduct without fearing retaliation, such as an anonymous toll-free hotline or an ombudsman monitoring and auditing system designed to detect misconduct is also required. Dito sa panglima, sinasabi dito na dapat kasama doon sa mabubuong code of conduct ang way ng kung papaanong ang isang empleyado ay magre-report ng maoobserbahan niya na misconduct ng isa pang empleyado. And dapat hindi siya dadalawang isip na i-report to kasi hindi siya natatakot or wala siyang pangamba na baka magantihan siya nito. Nakasaad dapat dun sa code of conduct na babubuo yung safetyness ng isang empleyado. Kapag kunwaring may i-report siya na misconduct ng another employee, dapat halimbawa yung maging confidential yung identity ng isang employee. Kasama rin dito yung secret, siguro like monitor, and syempre kasama talaga yun, mga CCTV ganon para ma-monitor yung galaw ng bawat tao na nasa loob ng isang company. Sixth, if misconduct is detected, then the firm must take appropriate and fair disciplinary action. Individual, both directly or indirectly responsible for the offense, should be disciplined. In addition, the sanctions should be appropriate for the offense. So, dito sinasabi na halimbawa may na-detect na pagkakamali or inappropriate behavior sa isang employee, dapat magkaroon ng fair disciplinary action. And kung sino man yung kasangkot sa gulo or mali na nangyari, ay magiging responsible or responsable dun sa kanyang nagawang mali. Ibig sabihin sila yung mapaparusahan. Siyempre, para maging fair ang isang company, dapat kung ano yung nagawang mali ng isang nagkamali is maging fair dapat yung magiging parusa nila. Ganon. Parang hindi naman pwede na may hindi kasi nasadyang nagawa or depende sa sitwasyon na hindi mo sinasadya halimbawa, tapos if-fired ka, medyo hindi siya fair pag ganon. And for the last, after misconduct has been discovered, the organization must take steps to prevent similar offenses in the future. This usually involves making modifications to the ethical compliance program, conducting additional employee training, and issuing communications about specific types of conduct. So, dito sinasabi sa panghuli na dapat pagkatapos ng nangyari, ang isang organisasyon ay gumawa ng hakbang upang maiwasan yung mga ganitong pangyayari in the future. Kinabibilangan nun is yung siguro magdagdag ng panibagong rule and then more training pa sa mga employee and pagkakaroon ng maayos na pagpapaliwanag sa kanila tungkol sa kung papaano dapat yung kanilang maging behavior or attitude sa loob ng kanilang trabaho. The government expects these 7 steps for compliance programs to undergo continuous improvement and refinement. These steps are based on the Commission's determination to emphasize compliance programs and to provide guidance for both organization and courts regarding program effectiveness. The organizations have flexibility about the type of program they develop. The 7 steps are not a checklist requiring legal procedures be followed to gain certification of an effective program. Organizations implement the guidelines through effective core practices appropriate for their firms. The programs they put into effect must be capable of reducing the opportunity employees have to engage in misconduct. A 2004 amendment to the FSGO requires a business governing authority be well informed about its ethics program with respect to content, implementation, and effectiveness. This places the responsibility squarely on the shoulders of the firm's leadership, usually the board of directors. The board must ensure there is a high-ranking manager accountable for the day-to-day operational oversight of the ethics program, provide for adequate authority, resources, and access to the board or an appropriate subcommittee of the board, and ensure there are confidential mechanisms available so organizations, employees, and agents may report or seek guidance about potential or actual misconduct without fear or retaliation. Finally, the board is required to oversee the discovery of risk and to design, implement, and modify approaches to deal with those risks. Figure 4 to 4 demonstrate employees at companies with effective ethics programs are more likely to view their corporate cultures as ethical. If board members do not understand the nature, purpose, and methods available to implement an ethics program, the firm is at risk and educate oversight and ethical misconduct that may be escalate into a scandal. A 2005 Supreme Court decision held that the federal sentencing guidelines were not mandatory but should serve only as recommendation for judges to use in their decisions. Some legal and business experts believe this decision might weaken the implementation of the FSGO, but most federal sentences remained in the same range as before the Supreme Court decision. The guidelines remain an important consideration in developing an effective ethics and compliance program. The 2007 to 2008 amendments to the FSGO extend the required ethics training to members of the board or governing authority, high-level personnel, employees, and the organization agent. These changes apply not only oversight but mandatory training to all levels of the organization. Merely distributing a code of ethics does not meet the training requirements. The 2007 and 2008 amendments now require most governmental contractors to provide ethics and compliance training. As new FSGO amendments are implemented, more explicit responsibility is being placed on organizations to improve and expand ethics and compliance provisions to include all employees and board members as demonstrated in four amendments to the guidelines implemented in 2010. The first amendment concerned chief compliance officers who report misconduct to the General Counsel. The guidelines recommend simplifying the complexity of reporting relationship by having the chief compliance officer make reports directly to the board or to a board committee. Companies are also encouraged extend their internal ethical controls through hotlines, self-auditing programs, and other mechanisms so misconduct can be detected internally rather than externally. In the third amendment, the FSGO added more specific language of the word prompt to help employees recognize what it means to report an ethical violation promptly. Finally, the FSGO amended the extent of operational responsibility to apply all personnel within company's ethics and compliance program. In 2012, the Federal Sentencing Commission proposed new amendments to the Federal Sentencing Guidelines. While these amendments covered many topics, major emphasis was given to changes resulting from the Dodd-Frank Act. These new amendments propose increased penalties for certain types of securities fraud. For instance, the amendments propose regulators differentiate between those who engage in frequent and deliberate insider trading and those who engage in this act due to the opportunity to make quick profits. The Federal Sentencing Commission recommended increasing sentences depending upon the money gained from the insider trading scheme as well as the willfulness of the offenders. The amendments also examined how to determine the value of collateral in cases of mortgage fraud. Additionally, the amendments listed four levels of offense for financial institution fraud. 1. Whether the fraud caused the institution become insolvent. 2. Whether it forced the institution to reduce benefits to pensioners or the insured. Third, whether it caused the institution to become unable on demand to fully refund deposit payment or investment. Or 4. Whether it depleted the assets of the institution to such an extent it was forced to merge with another institution. The amount of penalties can be increased depending upon the extent of the offense committed. Those found guilty of this type of fraud can have their sentences lengthened or reduced beyond the FSGO guidelines depending upon the amount of loss the fraud caused. The Department of Justice, through the Thompson Memo, advanced general principles to consider cases involving corporate wrongdoing. This memo makes it clear ethics and compliance programs are important to detecting the type of misconduct most likely to occur in particular corporation's line of business. If it does not have an effective ethics and compliance program in place to detect ethical and legal lapses, a firm found the violation should not be treated leniently. Additionally, the prosecutor generally has wide latitude in determining when, whom, and whether to prosecute violations of federal law. U.S. attorneys are directed that charging for even minor misconduct may be appropriate when the wrongdoing was perpetrated by a large number of employees in a particular role. For example, sales staff or procurement officers, or was condoned by upper management without an effective program to identify an isolated rogue employee involved in misconduct. A firm may suffer serious consequences in terms of regulatory issues, enforcement, and sentencing. Therefore, there is general agreement both in law administrative policy that an effective ethics and compliance programs is necessary to prevent misconduct and reduce the legal consequences if it does occur.